And we're back, the Masters of Materium. And tonight we are excited to bring back Michael Wagner, CEO, co founder of Automata, of Star Atlas. Some people said our first interview was the greatest Michael Wagner interview ever. We're going to try to make it better. It's going to be a tall order, but I think we will. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Virtual, I'm good, man. Here I am once again, talking to myself, staring at myself. Can I start with a question?
Yes.
When face reveal?
When face reveal. I think you got to go to the Star Atlas Summit and maybe you'll see my face there. Or maybe I'll be wearing a full-blown cosplay of a Poonab. I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
I don't know. You're a little too tall for that, but maybe you could pull it off.
I'm just an overgrown Poonab, but either that or a full-blown Fatoli outfit, which would be pretty wild.
Ooh,
I
yeah.
do think we need cosplay at the next Star Atlas Summit. So excited to have you back. There's been so much development since you first came. We're going to go through a lot of video clips tonight. I really want to go deep into the economy because there is no second best. And I brought receipts. I think when people see the actual numbers behind the Star Atlas economy, there is nothing like it in Web3. And then, of course, for all the diehards, which are definitely listening to this interview, hopefully you're feeling leaky. And that's my first question is how leaky do you feel right now?
Not very. We're keeping things pretty tight as of late, and really letting the work speak for itself. So you might be able to squeeze a little hint of alpha out of me here or there, but probably not going to go too crazy because we do have some big things coming up, and I don't want to spoil anything.
Fair enough. But yeah, we'll see how good my my skills are to extract information out of you tonight. But yeah, let's start with some updates. And I'm going to share a screen here because I think a lot of people are not aware of what you guys are really building. And I think there's nothing like it that's ever been created where you're going to be able to go from the macro to the micro. So maybe share a little bit about what's coming down the pipeline, and we're getting closer and closer to that reality where you're going to be able to either do top down strategy or first person shooter, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much coming. That's again, this incredible vision is nearer than a lot of people think.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, we've been really focused on two core gaming environments, and a lot of the Star Atlas community will be very familiar with this rhetoric, but we often say that what we're building at Star Atlas is really just a single unified gaming experience, but it's delivered across multiple different game environments. Now, most people have been spending their time in Sage, Star Atlas Golden Era, the lower fidelity RTS 4X MMO focused on play to earn, economic elements, extracting resources, crafting components, upgrading star bases. A lot coming in the pipeline in the Sage vertical, but we also have a team that's really fully focused on what we're building in the Unreal Engine side. And maybe I'll start with that. I don't think we've spoken too much about it, but we have released already two updates to that just over the course of this year. One of those in February, another one in March, and the team is on a really great stride and cadence, and we are targeting these monthly patches. They're not all substantial releases like we've perhaps done in the past, but it does provide us an opportunity to release consistent updates over time. Now, all of that is kind of contextualized across two larger releases that we do have planned for this year. In in the current phase, the team has really been working on arena shooter modes and enhancements to that gameplay. The logic there, the rationale was really driven by the fact that we've seen a gravitation to our arena shooter, third person shooter gameplay modes over the past couple of years when we started to roll these out, but in particular at various events that we were at, where we'll have the full client available, but everybody just tends to jump right into the third person shooter modes. And so, that's things like well, Surge is where it all started, but adding deathmatch, team deathmatch, adding gun game, adding the zones gameplay mode. There might be a few others that we add, but by and large, that might be relatively feature complete for now. Um, and the strategy is to drive engagement in immersive third person shooter gameplay with our very unique movement mechanics. We get a lot of compliments on this. It is one of the, I would say, more exciting aspects of our third person shooter, and that's being able to jetpack around. It's dashing, it's Superman flying. Um, yeah, so a lot of the year so far has been focused on that. The next couple of months, we'll be putting a little bit more emphasis into racing gameplay modes. And kind of the bigger piece of all of this is getting us to full dedicated multiplayer server support with at least an early version of anti-cheat. And maybe I'll just pause for a second after this, but uh, those two pieces in terms of infrastructure are quite critical, because not only does that allow us to have a persistent online uh, world, at least from the perspective of multiplayer instances and third person shooter and racing competition, but it also allows us to start to introduce some of the economic elements that we want to add to Unreal Engine.
Yeah, and maybe again, let's talk about that because I think it's one of the most exciting things where people that just want to have fun will still have some economic opportunities, whether it's leveling up their characters or discovering some exclusive resources that can only be found in UE5 and then sold to Sage players. So maybe you can get a little bit into that. I know there's some announcements coming soon. And yeah, maybe you can share a little bit more about what's going to be available for people that just want to live in Unreal Engine 5 game modes.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good way to frame it too, because there's a lot of different user profiles and user interests that will eventually converge into this single game that is Star Atlas. Um, Obviously, what you're showcasing right now, the visual identity is unmatched, and it's so attractive to showcase. But what we don't have right now, and what we recognize, is that there isn't really replayability per se. Like, I think there's, to some extent, that is there with racing. You can go out and explore Galia. You can go land on different planets, different biomes and environments. We just added the experimental space mining demo into the game. So there are things that you can do. There are things that you can engage in, but I would say, even from my perspective, I don't have that strong desire to come back every day um, and and continue, playing towards some goal. And so other parts of that are adding forms of progression with character leveling or account leveling, adding mastery of different skills. Now, that might be ship mastery in racing, or it might be weapon mastery through third person shooter gunplay. But this is where some of the rewards will start to come in as well as you progress through these tracks. And by completing various objectives, various tasks, coming back every single day, because there are bonuses for doing so, then you start to earn loot. And the loot tracks are part of the progression, and then that feeds directly into all of these extremely deep and complex uh, customization options that you'll have. It's one of the things that really blows my mind. I'm almost a bit overwhelmed on this, and Danny and the team have put an enormous amount of work into thinking through just exactly how much customization you'll be able to do. And that goes down to the crew member that you own, the loadout on that crew, being able to modify the guns and weapons that you have equipped on that crew member, full customization there. The ship itself, you can swap out modules, swap out components. Your crew are a part of that. And then on the larger scale, thinking about things like council rank and account wide progression, how that is going to impact your level of specialization and gameplay across Star Atlas. So some of these mechanics will start rolling out with the mastery tracks coming first, and that will encourage players to get involved in these multiplayer instances, get competitive, complete races or complete matches, and progress and earn this loot that's only going to be available through Unreal Engine. Now, there's also this is where I won't reveal too much, but we do have some exotic resources that are also only going to be harvestable through Unreal Engine. And what I think is really cool here, and maybe bringing this back to the whole macro to micro scale gameplay, is that Star Atlas is almost 5, 6, 7 games in one when it's all cohesive and playable together. And even for an individual that might have a preference to engage in this third person gameplay, occasionally they want to switch things up and go into the macro scale fleet command style gameplay of RTS or strategy 4X game and engage in that. And what I think is really cool is when you're balancing the two and set your fleets to go uh, on some route to go complete some objective like mining a resource or transporting goods. And while your fleets are doing that, you jump into a third person shooter match. So there's essentially always something that you're going to be able to engage in while you play.
Yeah, I think the future of Star Atlas is there's literally something for everybody. Like everybody. I think even down the line for kids, maybe at the CSS and some of the headquarters where it'll be more kids type gameplay. Like I just see the layers and game modes and ways people can be entertained and have fun and socialize just continue to expand from, hey, I just want to blow stuff up to I want the most complicated strategic 4X game of all time, which I think Star Atlas is going to be. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting. And I think the way I look at it right now, we have in first person shooter stuff, which is fun. But I think what we're going to look at right now is a clip of kind of exploring the universe. And I think a lot of solo players will want to just get into a ship, go to a planet, and just try to go find some cool loot, some cool resources, maybe tame a cool creature. All of these things are coming. Maybe we can take a look at the roadmap later. But yeah, let's just watch a little bit of this clip because it's awesome.
And virtual, I kind of hear the audio. I'm not sure if it's playing right now. Happy to talk over it while.
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to bring it back to that topic of user profiles as well, because there's a big narrative that's switched periodically in Web3 gaming between you know build great play to earn mechanics and economics, and then a bear market hits like 2022 2023, arguably even where we're still at right now, in spite of some secular positivity in the markets. But then there's like a shift of the narrative to, well, why aren't these guys just building great games? If they just focused on the games, like, don't worry about the crypto stuff. To me, it's always been the combination of the two is what makes Web3. But a product like what we're building in Unreal Engine can actually satisfy that that urge and demand from players for, hey, this is just really great fun gameplay, and perhaps they don't care as much about economic incentives, financial incentives, true asset ownership, marketplaces, trading, all of the things that make Web3 really unique, and I think add a lot of value to the entire player equation. But this is where we can introduce some of those really fun replayable mechanics that don't need to be overly compensatory, right? We don't have to have high rewards in there. And in fact, the barrier to entry, especially from a financial standpoint, is already quite low. So, it could be as simple as just get in and play for free, which will limit you in terms of what you can achieve from a progression standpoint, and the models that you can load in, the characters that you can load in, or spend a few bucks and buy some crew out there and load those crew into your wallet. Now those are models that you get to play. So you can almost think of them they're more than skins. We know them as more than skins, but realistically, for the average player, for the mainstream user, buying some crew members could really just be perceived as being, these are unique skins that I get to use in the game, and they could focus all of their time on Unreal Engine content, and their sole connection point to the marketplace is, following along those mastery tracks, earning some of this loadout loot, and either equipping it themselves or trading that to other players. Um, and I think that's pretty cool. Where we're going with Sage, and where a lot of our users are now, that's focused, I would say, much more heavily on the crypto native audience today. People who have this real desire for financial incentives, for things like yield, for earnings potential, and can draw the parallel between, well, I'm making this capital investment into game assets, and my decision to make this purchase is directly correlated to how much I can earn with it. And so there's a rationale and a motivation to scale those assets over time as well, so that you can kind of compete more specifically in that economic gameplay. This all does get a little bit turned on its head with the next major release with C4. That's really the big release for Sage this year, and that's combat, council rank, crafting habs. It's kind of 5C because we're adding cultivation facilities in there as well, but cultivation facilities are more directly tied, or kind of on par with uh, crafting habs, and then the council rank system in there as well. I think I mentioned all four, but that's the big release. But combat actually was the fourth one there. Combat really changes things up in how you engage in strategy in Sage, with our target release for C4.
Yeah, let's go through these 7 core economic activities, and I guess cultivation will be an eighth. But again, for people that are just new to the Star Atlas world, walk through each one of these and just give kind of the basic mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are probably pretty commonplace in just about any 4X game. Mining. There's uh, a vast variety of resources that will be distributed out across the map, and there will be multiple ways that you can engage in extracting those resources. Right now, current format is fairly simple. You're essentially identifying resource types based on the starbase sector that you're operating in. Uh, it does get a little bit more complex than that when you factor for uh, richness and hardness, which kind of goes into the formula of how quickly you can mine these resources, and also how many of our input resources are required. So food, fuel, ammunition, or toolkits, for example, go into extracting the resource. But um,
I want to jump in and highlight the fact that, and we're going to get into local markets in a minute. But right now, with that local market update, has been such a boon for a lot of players, where you can just go buy a single ship and go mine at a star base and sell the raw resources. That wasn't possible before. And because before you needed to transport, you needed all of these other extra ships. Now people are literally just parking themselves in one place, mining and selling the raw goods, which is awesome. So massive kudos there. It was a big launch.
yeah, and I think that's kind of the very foundation of the economy itself, is just the base raw resources that you can mine without any level of refinement going into those. And it's the easiest entry point for any new player. You mentioned buying one ship, for example. Um, the goal is certainly to allow for and create economic opportunities for players of every size. And that is a challenging problem to solve for, by the way, when you have such a diverse asset base, and the scale of assets ranging from a few dollars all the way up to millions of dollars of game assets. You still have to be able to strike a balance there. And how do you enable competitive, or at least engageable gameplay for those smallest users? And where that lies right now is largely with raw resources. With the C4 release, you'll actually see a transformation of the way that the map works. This might be a little bit of a leak, but sector based gameplay is going away, and it's going to be more coordinate point based gameplay, and so you won't have the little squares all over the map. It'll be um, uh, kind of perpetual and coordinate based, but along with that, it also opens up the opportunity to add different mining regions and things like being able to mine asteroids, for example, not from the Starbase sector, but from just about anywhere on the map. So that was already a lot on mining, but that's
Let's I got to ask a couple follow-ups there. One is, and it's been hinted, so it's nothing new, but that the asteroids will have maybe some RNG, some rarer resources that pop up. Once they're gone, they're gone. So is that still the game plan? We'll see kind of some randomization with some asteroid spawning happening all over the place, and then creating more cool, fun, dopamine driven RNG experiences on the asteroid side.
I would personally love to see that. I have to see what I don't think we've determined precisely what we're able to execute on with respect to RNG, but I think it's one of the most, like you often talk about, getting those dopamine hits, and
Mhm.
randomness included in the activity you're engaged in is a great driver of that. And so I would love to see us add more RNG throughout the entire game,
Mhm.
which also I think in a lot of ways drives players towards more active engagement. Now, I'm not opposed to passive gameplay and automation and route management, the things that exist in Sage today, especially when you're talking about a universe that is online 24/7 and your assets are never technically logged out of the game because they live on chain. When you when you step away from your computer and you have your assets in Sage, they're still there, and they're either there being active, performing some function, or they're dormant but perhaps vulnerable, right? And so I think the combination, though, of okay, you can determine your strategy and you can pre-configure your routes and you can have your fleets engaged in that set strategy, or and this is where it's particularly valuable to the smaller player, or you can really spend that time in game trying to figure out where the best opportunities are, like identifying new asteroid fields by perhaps doing some scanning, by the way, which is the next option. And once you identify those, then there is the potential for you to uh, extract a greater reward than just the consistent outputs that are available in the game today.
Yeah, well, I want to come back in a little bit to claim stakes, which is also coming with C4. But yeah, let's move on with the rest of these. Scanning has been one of the most profitable game loops. We'll take a look at some near immediate time ROI on different types of activities people can do in Sage, and scanning is one of the most profitable. You can basically buy a few ships, go scan, and make a great ROI. And arguably, it's been the best loop for players for a while. Um, Now with combat, I think scanners are, maybe it's the end of scanners, maybe it's the beginning of scanners. What's your opinion on the future of scanning in Star Atlas? I know that probably a lot more types of data units coming. Yeah, can you give us maybe a little clue of what we can expect in the future of scanners?
Well, I will say that scanning in the HRZ, which is I think everybody has discovered is where kind of the highest probability and best returns for scanning exist now. I think that by and large, at least in any level of automated fashion, is going to go away with C4. Um,
Mhm.
Still, we're still working through some of the combat mechanics, but there's a concept of battle lines, and to me, this is really critical for our release of combat. But battle lines will essentially establish territorial boundaries um, at the outermost edges of faction territory. And so, if you have linked star bases and you have the battle lines there, what that will prevent is players just roaming deep into an opponent faction's territory and just destroying ships in say safe zone or even in the inner edges of the medium risk zone. I think it becomes quite chaotic if you can just
Hmm.
navigate anywhere on the map right
Yeah.
now. And so, the intended mechanic there with the battle lines is that you effectively have to chip away at defenses, capture territories, and then that enables you to penetrate deeper into an enemy faction. So what that means though is outside of those battle lines, which we'll probably define as to some extent the HRZ, not with the full play for keys, permanent asset, burn mechanics at this stage, but that'll be the undefended territory of map, and it is the free for all area of the map. So um, if you do intend to scan for SDUs, out, for example, out in HRZ, at that point, I'm sure you'll want to be more actively managing your gameplay while you do so.
Now, with to the battle lines, that was some big alpha right there. I'm assuming on the if somebody's trying to penetrate a faction, the other side could be just putting in toolkits trying to repair the wall as the enemy's trying to penetrate. I'm assuming.
That's partially the idea, but also if you know that a region of your faction is under attack, then bring your fighter ships out there and go
Yeah.
counterattack them, right?
Give, got it. So there could be some combat, even with the wall intact, you could still have combat along the border.
Correct. That's
Interesting.
the idea. Yeah.
Very cool. Let's move on to crafting, which you'll see in a minute is arguably the most profitable thing anyone can do. And not that long ago, you introduced a whole new asset class, which was crew. It's been a huge success. I'll share a little clip in a second of the crew pack openings, which is incredibly addictive. I've definitely been hooked. Bought a ridiculous amount of crew packs. Love the experience. Beautifully designed RNG because you can get different crew rarities from anomaly down to common, and I was lucky enough to pull out anomaly, which was an incredible dopamine rush. And the cool thing with crew is that it has all these different types of utilities, including crafting. So maybe just give kind of the basics of what crafting is and start out with.
Yeah. Well, just on crew, by the way, though, internally, and I know myself personally, we're susceptible to the same addictive pack opening mechanics. I don't even think I really need crew anymore, but I still go out and buy a few packs here and there just because I really want a tufa, an anomalous tufa. Um, uh, I've not been fortunate enough to get any anomaly, but I do have quite a few legendary that I'm happy with. But um, yeah, crafting is the refinement process, and so in the current state of the economy, though, crafting is largely utilized to get to a fixed earnings outcome, and so we've done that. We did that originally with RFRs. You need all of these different compounds and components, and those require certain number of raw materials, and you take it through the loop, uh, creating the outputs that you require. You combine those together, and then you redeem that for an RFR originally. Now they're the faction infrastructure contracts, of which there's two different types, and kind of different supply chains across each of the three factions. Same objective though, you're kind of consuming and burning the resources that you've harvested, and the outcome is an FIC. Now, crafting is also used to some extent for what we call ship redemptions. This is not outright ship crafting with blueprints, which is really the future version and vision of this. But right now, it's taking resources, again, crafting compounds, components, and redeeming those with the faction. And in return, right now there's two ship models that are available, and that's the Calico Max Hog and the Fimble Mamba X. So just two full ship inventories that we've dedicated to um, not selling it all and just making available as part of the loot table. In the future, however, crafting really does become, um, I would say, a more sophisticated layer. Did you just open this, or was this
No, this was recorded when I was opening
okay.
that. Yeah.
I saw you capturing the screenshot there in it, so I was I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
curious. But
It's recorded a while back. This guy is
yeah.
pretty cool though. I mean, check out the art. I mean, that's the thing too. Every crew, this looks amazing. I mean, you can see here is just beautifully designed, and you know we're going to be able to use these crew members in Unreal Engine 5. It's just awesome, right? So, anyway, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, and so I'll pull crew into this conversation, but just to kind of round out that topic of the future of crafting is really being a critical supplier in the entire supply chain. And it's not necessarily, it's most likely that we see a deprecation at some point in the future of things like FICs and RFRs, and what you're actually crafting are components that go into, say, star-based defense or battle line defense, or you're using um, asset class blueprints, which is most likely ships or ship components. But I could see that extending to buildings that will exist on claim stakes, for example. Well, you're crafting all of the components that go into all of these things, and you might have a desire to take that all the way through to completion, or you might just specialize in crafting a very specific warp thruster for one or two of the manufacturers in the game, and your entire gameplay loop is just identifying areas where you can craft or extract the raw resources for that, crafting those outputs and selling those to other players. And then of course, I think what will persist uh, in forever into the future is really those four base consumable resources. So you're always going to need forms of ammunition. Now that will probably change over time to different ammunition types. You're always going to need some form of fuel. Again, multiple different types of fuel that you can equip on your ship to accomplish different things. Um, Toolkits for things like repair, and food to feed your crew. And then bringing that in with crew, the way that is integrated into Sage is your crafting potential scales directly with the amount of crew members that you have. So the more crew you have, either the faster you can craft or the more you can craft over a fixed period of time.
Yeah, I did some math today, so you're kind of hitting a lot of the key points I wanted to bring up. Might as well get into it now. And just counting what we have now, there's 1,924 markets, right? The 9 raw resources, the 4 consumables, the 12 compound materials, 9 components, 2 infrastructure contracts, the scanning data units, and then multiply everything by 52, including the galactic market, right? So there's always opportunities, and you guys are going to be adding thousands of new ones, correct? Based on new recipes, new raws. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. But this is a mind blowing number: 19 that people can play, and that's what's cool is no matter how small or big you are, there's opportunities in Star Atlas.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about staying in one location, mining raw and selling that on the local marketplace. I, we know for a fact that there are also arbitrage opportunities across markets. Now, um, maybe not at a scale that is attractive enough right now, but over time, with the 52 local markets right now, just imagine that increasing exponentially as well when you have player created star space stations in addition to the star bases, right? And then those players
Wow.
that are running their space stations have the ability to expand platforms on that. Maybe they add a trading platform, and now that becomes a new local market in the game. And
Wow.
if you're strategic with that and you know where people are traveling and you can defend it, well, you might be the prime location that people like to trade through just because of where it's located. um, So, but I think this whole freighting gameplay loop is also exceptionally cool. Where
Mhm.
if you find an arbitrage opportunity, you can buy resources off of one local marketplace, transport them to another, and there's immediate profit in that.
Yeah, speaking of profit, let's take a look at, and again, you're not making any financial statements, so tell Dan Park to chill. But this is some screenshots I took earlier today, straight out of Aephia's dashboard, looking at different budgets and different types of game loops people can do, starting with scanning. If you have a $200 budget, and this is today, and it's been a bloody day, it's been a bloody week, and it's still a 40+% ROI if you buy rainbow cheese for $200, which is basically a couple of them. Next, if you buy $500 worth, it's 49% because you're getting a little bit of leverage with bigger fleets because your sole transaction fees are getting smaller in relation to your total fleet size. A bunch of other ships are quite good as well. I mean, to do a 49% ROI at where we're at in the market, pretty mind blowing. At $1,000 scanning budget, again, it goes up to over 51.9. And then here's some mind blowers. If you just buy a crew, which we just looked at, there's some cool opportunities, whether it's installing the components, so literally buying off the marketplace and installing them, or you can basically craft the components and sell them. One tip I have if you're looking at doing that is things like fuel um, are great because it's just an infinite demand for fuel. Some of these things like crystal lattice, there's not as much liquidity, so keep that in mind. But there's so many opportunities for people, whether it's buying crew, buying miners, buying scanners, and every time you guys add a mechanic, it's creating more opportunities. It's making the economy stronger and stronger. And then with Unreal Engine 5 coming soon, it's going to add a whole new circular layer, which is going to take the already greatest in-game economy of all time to a new dimension. I mean, you got incredible financial economic mind. What are you anticipating is going to happen if, let's say, 10,000 players are just grinding Unreal Engine 5, and how that's going to impact Sage and vice versa?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I think the impact of those players is going to be most greatly realized in the configuration of your assets in Unreal Engine more than anything. But certainly there will be the exotic resource crossover, which then goes into specific crafting recipes in Sage. We do have a desire here to drive crossplay, if you will. Like, we want our Sage players to also get in and play Unreal Engine. We want our Unreal Engine players in particular to consider engaging in Fleet Command or in Sage gameplay and thinking about scaling up their game assets. The greatest impact is probably just in the demand for game assets overall, and especially if you have that tight connection between the gameplay and then that motivation to scale your game assets over time, because you recognize that these opportunities exist, especially as you're more and more engaged in the game over time. It's I know there's a lot of discussion about the amount of assets excuse me, that are on the market right now, but we're talking about the golden cohort, about 1100 daily active users. It's quite successful in its own right, especially considering those are people that are engaged in a lower fidelity version of our vision. But man, it does not take a lot of player and user growth to really absorb not only any inventory that's out there on the secondary market right now that's perhaps under origination price, but also all of the inventory that we already have out there. So we have quite a few ships that are unreleased that are in a releasable state, but we are, I think, in a position now where we're kind of waiting, and we want to couple that with bigger releases, and we especially want to couple game asset releases with player growth. And so that is kind of the entire strategy moving forward, is is thinking through all of those different variables. What are we going to do that lowers the barrier to entry, makes the game more accessible, um, more intuitive or easier to play, and then um, satisfies the gameplay mechanics that people are most interested in. And so, I this is a little bit of a tangent to your actual question, but some of the things that we've already done over the course of this year include, the formal announcement of our relationship with Shaga and the work that we're doing with them to bring game streaming to players all over the world. So that's an accessibility component of getting involved in Unreal Engine for people that don't have a higher end or capable gaming PC to be able to engage in that. And I guess if I were to extend that tangent even a little bit farther, I would just say that, um, uh, I am thinking a lot about emerging markets because we see some of the largest growth from regions like Southeast Asia, Philippines, LATAM, and uh, like how do we get that player into the game? Making sure that they can access the Unreal Engine client if they want to is one. Creating those economic crossovers between Sage and Unreal Engine so that there's actual demand, player demand, peer-to-peer demand for the output, and we're not relying on, say, token emissions or inflation as the driving earnings mechanic. You've got fleet rentals pulled up here, another feature release and product release that I'm really proud that we got out already this year.
which
And this is
which is also huge for new players, right? Basically, I pulled up a decent sized fleet here. This is tens of thousands of dollars in VWAP with the Calico Guardian and some other ships. Basically, somebody who's just entering the game can rent this for 3,800 Atlas per day, which is, I don't know what the conversion is right now, but it's not that much money. It's just a few bucks. So literally, somebody from Southeast Asia could rent this fleet and go play, which is incredible, right? So maybe talk about rentals. Obviously, it's a huge opportunity, I think, for new players as well as maybe investors that just want to buy ships, put them to rent, and be more of a passive style of investment.
Yeah. Well, let me come right back to rentals, but just to again round out that thought of just the ways that we're increasing accessibility and simplifying onboarding. Fleet rentals is a critical component of that because, again, the financial barrier to entry, especially to get into Sage, is quite high. Now, you just showed off some numbers where, even $200 in game assets still produces a pretty sizable yield for the player. So I think that's a positive shift. Now, I don't know if that's looking at current market prices and factoring for that, or if it's using origination price.
I think it's
Uh,
looking at current market
okay.
prices. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's where the opportunity is present today, but we still want that opportunity to persist into the future as we get back to origination prices on game assets. But this is another way that you can achieve that. If you don't have, even $200 to spend or 500 or 1,000 or, to really be competitive in Sage in the tens of thousands of dollars, well, here's your tens of thousands of dollars fleet that you're getting access to for $4.50, and the earnings is commensurate with what you would earn if you own the fleet with the additional cost of paying the owner. So, your margins are a little bit thinner, but at least you can get in and start playing and you can start scaling. And this is going to contribute significantly, I think, to strategy when we get into C4, when we get into combat systems, and I'll just mention one thing here, virtual, and it kind of goes on to that continuation of this topic. But like one thing that I want to see is when you are controlling and securing a territory, and you need to hire security forces to patrol your say space station when you're not there. I want that like funding to go directly through the rental system so that there isn't just arbitrary artificial creation of fleets out there, like these security services that'll be NPCs. It's not that they just are created out of thin air. They're
Mm.
actually secured by going through the rental platform or something similar, where
Nice.
you're securing these game assets from other players who are making them available to you, which really drives home that value of asset ownership and revenue potential, passive revenue potential. So just to kind of finish it though, so fleet rentals, the work with Shaga, we have a completely overhauled version of Sage that is going to be coming out. That's a free to play version. Now it's not, it's not like there's economic incentives or big economic incentives in there. We do want to integrate some of it, so to kind of enhance the interest in playing, but it'd be very small scale. But that's another way that we can at least capture interest. That lets us probably get mobile deployments of that version of the game onto, the Google Play Store and Apple's App Store, and really just broaden the reach, get as much distribution and exposure as possible from that, and then work on time and converting those users into mainnet users. And then the final piece here is the stuff that we're doing with AI right now, which is focused predominantly on this virtual assistant or virtual companion concept, uh, which in and of itself branches into like 20 different ways that it can benefit a new player. But uh, the first of those is, if Sage is already quite complex, there's no onboarding tutorials. Sure, let's, Dom's doing some work on that. So let's get some tutorials out and help people learn how to play just by watching a video on YouTube. But when you have a question in the moment, being able to consult with your virtual companion to walk you through the process, it solves a lot of problems for us. And I think reduces that friction of coming into the game. Uh, and I'll also say one last thing here is
Mhm.
on the free to play modality, which is we get the benefit of being able to experiment a little bit more freely in that. It's almost like our free to play client, from everything that I've seen already, is the test bed for what is already our test bed, which is Sage, which is really the test bed for the mainnet economy. But so bringing out things like the faction wide chat box, so you can actually have conversations with other players while you're playing the game. And that not only helps people navigate the universe, but man, just that social layer adds a new dimension and depth to feeling like you're actually in an MMO, um, with other players around you. You feel much less isolated when you're in the game, in the environment, and chatting with other players live.
That's awesome. Didn't know you guys built that. I mean, we kind of people that are in guilds get some of that within their discords, but to have that within the game is going to be massive. So I think there's a bigger topic that I want to get into, and I think we covered enough content for people that are curious about Star Atlas. Um, and again, there's stuff. There's the Unreal Engine 5. You guys saw some of the economic numbers. I want to shift a little bit more into the current user base and ask some of the questions. I did get some questions from Rome and some other people. But one of the big things that's coming this year, which I'm super excited about, and I'm doing my part to help out, is essentially a new marketing funnel. And part of that includes the free to play layer. So share whatever you're comfortable sharing around kind of really invigorating and bringing in new people into the ecosystem. You brought in Francesca, who's amazing, to be the head of marketing, and probably a new website coming. I mean, again, share whatever you're comfortable sharing around the marketing effort that's going to be coming out once certain puzzle pieces are put into place.
Well, it all starts with the product, and I think where we had a lot of success in 2021 was being very fortunate in the cycle, but also being, I think, doing quite well at communicating the vision uh, of what we wanted to accomplish with Star Atlas. And we're at a stage of the company where I still think it's important to communicate the vision, because it really is unique. And uh, a- and yes, it's grandiose, but like, now we have demonstrated progress that we're taking steps towards what that vision is. But it really is it's distinct from just a video game, and I say this a lot, and it's like Star Atlas is more than just a video game. It's that cybernation concept. It's economic and financial opportunity. It's global, borderless digital participation in a new virtual society. But um, I think by and large, it's more difficult to purely sell a vision over time, and especially when you're navigating markets like we're navigating now. But let me maybe bring this back to some of those user profiles that I was describing earlier, and that's the traditional gamer is certainly one profile we want to go after, and our efforts in Unreal Engine are largely going to lead to tailored marketing towards those users. And you mentioned the website. It's like uh, some reformatting of the website is warranted, but also really cleaning up the user journey so that it's simple to capture an email, simple to distribute a game access key, and simple to guide people into Unreal Engine experiences so they can start to experiment with Star Atlas where it's at right now. Another profile, though, is the play to earn. You could say extractor mentality, but I don't necessarily, I think that has a negative connotation, but these are people that are truly looking for economic opportunities outside of those available to them locally. Um, I think one could argue that a lot of the people from the Philippines that got involved in Axie Infinity were perhaps this extractor mentality, but the reality is these are the same people that are still engaged in Axie to some extent, or to games that are launching on Ronin right now. And I think a lot of these are kind of lower fidelity games, and not something I'm particularly interested in. But when you see daily active user numbers exceeding 100,000 and in some cases a million, like that's incredible. And that's not I don't not to disparage the games at all, but again, it's not because these are like super mainstream attractive games. It's because the economic opportunity exists there, and these people will engage and will play and will contribute to your economy as a result of that. And so I think it's kind of like the lower spend user, but man, certainly helps fill out the population of a new digital society. And then there's like and this is why things like free to play, where give them an access point where it costs absolutely nothing to get in, start playing, start earning, start competing on leaderboards, maybe have a chance to win something in a season that gets your foot in the door onto mainnet. But uh, it's kind of the gateway drug into Star
Hmm.
Atlas of like, here's your free hit. Now, we have separate corporate goals with that in terms of monetization, and we're looking at different avenues of subscription models and perhaps microtransaction models that very much are more of the Web2 traditional monetization strategies. But it's entirely possible because this is a free to play model, right? And it
Hmm.
doesn't compete with the mainnet model. So uh, obviously, everything we can do at Automata to help drive revenues uh, helps us scale the company and helps us continue to build this game. So I think it's kind of critical to mention that. But then there's that investor mentality, and by and large, I would say that's it's investor or just more crypto oriented. But um, with continuous enhancements to the economy, with things like the Atlas Locker addendum and the way that we can help drive value there, which it, this might be obvious, but I want to plainly state it. The better Atlas does, the better every single person in our ecosystem does, and the stronger of a flywheel we have to attract new users over time. And so that's why things like the Atlas Locker addendum, I wanted to at least communicate that early, because I think that has incredible potential to drive demand for Atlas, for retention of earnings of Atlas. And to be quite frank, if the exchange rate of Atlas goes up, that means all of our players are more profitable. That means yields are higher across the board, and it becomes a bigger opportunity for new players to come in, which means those new players are also buying game assets and helping, drive value of all of the assets that our players today have. But something like fleet rentals, for example, again, thinking about eliminating obstacles for people. Well, if you've ever had even a vague interest in Star Atlas, but then you jump into our Discord or you connect to Sage and you're like, holy shit, I have no idea what to do. You're immediately overwhelmed. Well, we've provided now an avenue for people to still be a part of the Star Atlas ecosystem in the form of asset ownership, with the simple process of, hey, I want to be a ship lord, right? Like a landlord. And I've drawn the parallels to real estate many times on this, but you can be a member of Star Atlas by simply forming fleets and renting those out to other players. And what we've already demonstrated, and this was the absolute best possible outcome with fleet rentals, demand is overwhelming. It's driving 1 million Atlas per day on a peer-to-peer basis. That's non-inflationary earnings between users. And 80%, Chris covered this and Gareth covered this in the last econ forum, but 80% of every fleet that's listed is rented out. And I would make a strong argument that the 20% that aren't getting rented are simply mispriced. They're probably overpriced. So you essentially have a near 100% success rate in fleets that are listed on the platform. This ultimately, what we want to drive home through marketing is this is the passive income opportunity that is sustainable. Because where a lot of the whole narrative of passive income off of game assets has failed in the past is that they've all been reliant on hyperinflation of game currency. And this couldn't be farther from that. This is organic, tangible demand from live players who want to use the assets to go participate in the economy, and they still capture their share off of the value that's created within the economy. The asset owner themselves now has a hands-free way of earning from the Star Atlas economy without having to really do anything outside of some initial setup. And by the way, that I think we've gotten a little bit of criticism from people because things are renting as quickly as they are, suggesting that new players are not going to get access to to any of these assets. But I think this is very early stage. If we can stimulate that investor mentality side to acquire game assets and supply them on the marketplace, then over time we find a finer equilibrium between what's listed, when it's rented, how long that takes, and also providing a variety of fleet types that are attractive to smaller players who are looking to just dip their toes into the Star Atlas economy as well. But yeah, that's coupled with like new email activation campaigns, some video content that we're producing, the website re-architecting to some extent. We're still working through that, but I want the product to be the core driver in a lot of these, and our messaging is tailored to each of those unique demographics or those unique profiles of potentially interested users.
One of the greatest copywriters of all time, Gary Bensavenga, once said, "A mighty product trumps a mighty pen," and he literally made a living out of writing some of the best copy that's ever been written. And that's been, as an entrepreneur, it is all about the product. And again, I'm so bullish on what's coming because all the puzzle pieces are going to be there, reassembled. And I just see this beautiful streamlined funnel where people can come in through interesting, engaging content marketing, whether it's UE5, whether it's lore. They see it, they're interested, they go to the site, they opt in, they get more information, they can go play the free to play layer in Sage and go through that journey, or they can jump right into Unreal Engine 5, earn XP, get the chance to get some rare exotic loot and monetize that game time. And then all of that funnels into Sage. Some people will just prefer living in UE5. Some people will want to go deep into Sage. And once you're deep into Sage, it's as one of my mentors used to say, it's a greased chute. There's no stopping it, right? You're just getting deeper and deeper. And we've seen that with the core, 1,000 Sage players, where it doesn't matter what you throw at us. We're just accumulating more assets. We're buying more crew. We're buying more ships. And, if we just double the Sage user base from 1,000 to 2,000, almost all of the secondary assets will be gone. If you add 5, 10,000 Unreal Engine 5 players on top of that, I mean, the economy is going to explode. Add the Atlas locker mechanics on top of that. Now Atlas is starting to get sucked off the marketplace, and pulled out of the market altogether. So again, for those of us that are deep into Star Atlas, we see what's coming, and it's incredibly exciting. So that's, again, I'm insanely bullish.
Well, and I meant to mention this, but that that Atlas Locker flywheel, we won't really see any impact from that. I didn't expect to see any impact from that, just from the announcement of the addendum, right? That the purpose there was to communicate and propose a few avenues that we saw of contributing value to what is effectively savings, right? I mean, it's uh, this might sound contradictory, but uh, lower velocity of money, specifically of the game currency, can actually lead to a more profitable environment for players. And that's specifically driven by the exchange rate, by the value of what it is that you're holding. Well, how do we accomplish that? We accomplish that by encouraging people to retain earnings, to save. Like, what I don't want to see, and where that extractor mentality is detrimental to projects, is there's no possible benefit to holding that token into the future. It's unless it's pure speculative, right? Which is what a lot of people, well, a lot of people might do, but uh, many more will probably just extract the token and then liquidate it, and they will do that to the maximum that they can, which is obviously the opposite of what you want to see happen. And so the more value that we can add and utility that we can add to Atlas as a currency, and specifically these retention and savings mechanisms through the locker, well, the better performance and the more stable that currency will be over time. And at the risk of sounding somewhat uh, you know Ponzi-esque, from two factors, like, which we couldn't be farther from, but uh, we're only really going to see the positive effects of that flywheel when we see player growth. It's pretty incredible what can happen if you get 10,000 new players that all want to participate in, just, I guess it'll be tier 2 now, right, of the law, or tier 3 of the locker, just in what that represents in total supply of the token that's absorbed and deposited into those lockers. But that's when we're going to see the big impact of any implementation of those Atlas Locker addendums, when every single new player in the game says, you know what, the benefits here are so overwhelming. I have to put 10,000 Atlas in there. And I really want to get to tier 4, because that's when I can maximize my benefits. And so every unit of currency that they earn from gameplay, chuck it into the locker, and get your Polis rewards and get your gameplay benefits as you go.
Incredibly exciting. So let's just wrap up a couple of more slides and we'll get into Q&A. You covered a lot of this, but I was saving some of my deeper questions for this moment. So as far as what's coming up next, we're at C4. We've got, and I want to circle back to C4, but and you covered a lot of key points. We have the fully open preseason access. Maybe talk a little bit about that, because obviously that's going to be a big moment and probably really when the marketing kicks off.
Well, what do you mean by fully open?
Well, no, you don't need a key anymore. You can just go to the Epic store and play, and it'll be open to everybody.
Okay, so just to fully clarify here, we
Season
still
zero.
have, yeah, season 0 is when we will get to that open access of the
Got
game
it.
client.
Okay.
We're anticipating 2 major releases before we get to season 0. Now, things do kind of change, and the pace and momentum of the team is quite strong, so we'll see what happens. But even without just having the client readily downloadable on Epic Game Store, part of how we solve that problem, which is self-imposed, by the way, but part of how we solve that problem is by simplifying access to the game access key itself. And that's where the website redesign and the email capture funnel, come into play. Hey, want to play? Sign up
Mhm.
to our newsletter. We're going to send you a game access key. So it is nearly effectively the same as open access, but we get the benefit of capturing an email. So now we can communicate with people in that channel,
Mhm.
um, and we get to maintain our defensibility. It's one of the risks of going open access, is that will you're kind of communicating and announcing to the world that, hey, we're ready for you to judge where we're at right now. And we just know that, like, the mechanics that we want to get online around full character progression, mission system, storyline, things like that, um, until we get there where there's consumable content right at the start and that kind of walks you through the game, we don't want to go open access just yet. However, yeah, preseason, we're still in preseason. Right now, the plan is 2 major updates. Uh, the first of these major updates is where we're introducing the dedicated multiplayer server infrastructure, anti-cheat systems, uh, mastery tracks, and some form of character progression into the game. The emphasis on the first release is rounding out and polishing the arena shooter and arena shooter modes. The second component of it is really putting some polish on multiplayer racing and bringing that out as a substantial release. From there, and this might shift, but from there, there is an intention to transition more into open world content. And I don't want to get too much into what the plans are around that. There is one uh, significant gameplay mode that we're targeting right now that I think is completely transformative for our potential to grow users in Star Atlas. Um, Pretty unique gameplay mechanics too. So uh, I'm very excited about it. But yeah, and then, like, through all of that, you also have these economic crossover into Sage, and we're trying to cross pollinate people um, uh, 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 between the different gameplay modes.
We covered the Atlas Locker. We talked about the marketing funnel. Let's go back to C4. I got a couple of topics I want to get into. So we covered combat a little bit, some good alpha around kind of the borders. Now, in terms of combat itself, how much strategy and tactics are going to be available with the V1 release in terms of fleet design? And, because I think one of the concerns players have in general is, well, if this guy's got a bigger fleet than me, he's just going to blow me up, right?
Yeah.
And is there going to be a way where, there's edges available if you're a little bit smarter? Um, I'm just curious if that's part of it. Is there any strategy? Is there any tactics that will be available with the first release?
We're trying to work some in, specifically some RNG, but by and large, this is uh, our atomic combat, um, that we actually rolled out. A bunch of people tested it. It is deterministic, so it's pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, I had some major concerns. In fact, I was probably the most resistant to releasing combat across the team, just because I think it is absolutely critical that we get it right, and I think it does have. uh, I think it poses a pretty significant risk of disrupting consistency in how you play. And if it's not fun, if all it does is takes away, say, your earnings, which is a major driver of user engagement today, it leaves a lot of players frustrated without having the upside. So we are working on balancing that out. There are looting mechanics. Like I said, what convinced me that we could move forward with this was the idea of the battle lines and the territory lines. So I
Mm-hmm.
really think it's more optional combat if you want to engage in it. I think there's probably some chance, and I'll just stress this: your assets are on chain 24/7, whether you are there or not. There is no logging out. Now, your game assets will auto respond to an attack, even if you're not the aggressor. But there's a possibility that people are not paying attention. They leave their fleet somewhere, and they become vulnerable and susceptible to attacks. So perhaps some strategy there. Otherwise, I think players and DAX in particular that are roaming collectively and organized
Mm-hmm.
and defining, like an attack point or an attack time. Hey, let's go attack this battle line at this starbase at this time and see if we can overwhelm it, and then shift the territory lines back. I think that'll be some of the strategy. But in terms of pure fleet versus fleet, and I think this is realistic, but kind of the bigger fleet most likely is going to win, or at least in most circumstances it will.
Now, what about fleet composition? Will we start to see some of the ships, like a repair ship, get some additional or some in-game utility in combat?
We'll have to see on that one. I can't say right now where we're at with the ship roles,
Mhm.
what enhancements we'll see. At a minimum, obviously, we will see the utility arrive for fighter class ships, which is really the overwhelming majority of the ship roles or ship types that are out in
Fighters and bombers, right? I'm assuming bombers will have utility as well.
yeah. Yeah, well, I think bombers, the way they're going to work in Sage is it, it, it's not like you can navigate over another ship in Sage, right? Like you would if you were attacking ground units or attacking
Right.
buildings, or otherwise flying over somebody's ship and trying to time dropping a bomb. So they're going to perform very similar to the way that fighter ships operate, but you'll
Mhm.
instead of more frequent lower damage attack, it's probably like periodic high damage attacks, like slightly slower than fighter ships will be.
But bombers, I mean, one of their main utilities is going to be the star base attacks, maybe some of the defensive wall attacks. I'm assuming that's where they'll probably shine the most in combat.
You're probably right. Just to be fair, this is still going through. It's still with blockchain right now, so we have kind
Mhm.
of co-development effort where blockchain team typically leads. They create all of the logic uh, through Solana programs, and um, they deliver the bindings to the web team. The web team starts to build all of that out. So we have a bit of concurrent development going on there, but we still have to see how the on-chain component of this resolves before I can elaborate at all on how specifically things are going to work.
Now back to crafting a little bit. So far, we have not been able to craft bombs.
Hmm.
We've been able to craft ammo. I'm assuming some of the new resources coming, some of the new recipes. I'm assuming missiles and bombs are going to be part of that recipe set.
Fair enough to request, and I could certainly see us adding new ammo types with the release of C4. I think that's probably a relatively light lift. Where that might get complicated is just if you have mixed fleets, but if there's if you have a mixed fleet with bomber, fighters, whatever else in it,
Mhm, mhm.
then your ammo bays, you have a new stat line and ammo bay for the different types of ammo that you could be consuming. So
Now, just to excite some of the strategists, such as myself, for the future of combat, there, and I think it's season one, and I will drop the link to the Star Atlas roadmap in the show notes. And it's definitely worth taking a look at. Maybe I can pull it up as well in a few minutes. But I think, and it's also in the Sage manual, there's going to be actually different types of attacks coming down the line. Probably not with V1, but that'll add a tremendous amount of strategy. If there's 4 or 5 different types of weapons that damage different types of attacks, whether it's the hull or the shield, now that multiplies the strategic complexity by orders of magnitude, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to crafting habs. And I have a confession. I'm still confused. So
Me too.
maybe okay, good. I feel a bit better. Um, yeah, it's like, what is a crafting hab? Like, okay, just to lay for especially for new people, and even for and like I talk to people in the community. No one really understands this yet, so hopefully we can try to get some sort of clarity around this. But the only thing I know of that was kind of a crafting thing was the crafting tables
Hmm.
that were included with some of the claim stake purchases. So is crafting habs going to be something that we can buy? Is this something you guys are going to sell? Is this something we can, craft? And where are we going to put these? And I'm assuming these will buff our crafting capabilities. Do we need one at every star base? So these are some of the crafting hab questions floating around.
Yeah. And Danny would be able to give you a lot more detail than I would on these, but these are derived from CSS land plots.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we probably won't sell crafting habs individually, but uh, they might accompany land plot sales in the future. They are movable, so you can decide if you want to move your crafting hab from one star base to another. If you centralize your, say, crafting operations at a specific star base, they will account for um, some amount of kind of limited inventory that you can store. And otherwise, Danny's mentioned this, that they will allow you to craft using a certain number of slots for free, but it's not unlimited. So you'll have your crafting slots, and you'll have their crafting capacity. And when you use them for crafting, you just don't have to pay the crafting fees at starbases because you're not using the resources of the starbase itself.
I have a fear, Michael. And
Okay.
the fear is inventory. So is the vision in the future, how's that going to work, especially for bigger players? Is inventory something that will be heavily gated? Do we need to build special cargo containers if we have a lot of inventory? What happens if you hit your inventory limit? Like, what's the future vision around inventory?
Uh, from what I know, there are intended to be inventory limits. So yes, probably looking at uh, cargo pods,
Mhm.
storage facilities of some sort. But yeah, there are supposed to be inventory limits, which obviously is a constraint that we do not have in the game right now.
Got it. So, but again, players very likely would be able to craft some of these cargo pods and then store things there. Correct? I'm assuming.
Yeah, and from my viewpoint, I mean, it's pure speculation to try to determine what those numbers would be, or
Mhm.
what all of those mechanics, how those would resolve. Uh, we do want a sense of realism in the game. That would imply that you can't just craft an infinite amount of, storage space on, say, a star base, or
Mhm.
um, because there's still only so much physicalized space at those star bases. So, making sure there's a sense of realism to that gameplay as well. This probably couples into space stations, and perhaps how you can expand your space station and store resources or materials there. But yeah, I'm actually just speculating with you here. It's not a
Uh,
detail I'm really familiar with.
I love that. I love speculating with you. But next is council rank. We don't need to go too deep, but for those of you that don't know what that is, if a new player comes into the game, the amount of assets they can bring in is limited by their XP. As their XP levels up, they can bring in more assets. Which, again, if you're not playing the game right now, um, my suggestion is start playing, because you can earn or pre-earn XP before council rank. gets activated, which will allow you to bring in more assets. So any other comments you want to add on council rank, Michael? I know you've covered this pretty heavily with the past.
No, well said. But the team is also deeply expanding the application of council rank and the skill tree and progression that's available to a player through that as well. So again, really being able to refine and define exactly how you want to play, scale horizontally, scale vertically, operate bigger assets, um, uh, be more performant in a particular activity. So a pretty sophisticated skill tree that you'll be able to use your council rank points apply those. And really the simplest form of it was what we released with that Sage game paper that was, geez,
Mm-hmm.
like 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is intended to provide some guardrails and requirements to progress your character to bring more assets in to be able to operate larger class game assets as well, and a whole licensing system behind that. So it really takes away from the whole, well, this is just a pay to win game.
Mm-hmm.
Because sure, you could spend a bunch of money, but you're going to have to spend the time and earn the progression to be able to gain access to all of those assets that you purchased.
You're bringing up a really big point too, which we looked at. There's over 1,950 markets already, but with the trees and the license and the career and progression, what that's going to do is open up levels of specialization where, and again, I'm just speculating here. I'm want to hear your thoughts, but I don't know if a guy could specialize in fuel, for an example. Maybe he can use his points and gain some sort of edge, which allows him to be more profitable with certain activities, such as crafting certain types of items. So, can you elaborate a little bit on the future of specialization in Star Atlas? Which now, if a player just goes all in into one type of career, he can start really out competing some of the bigger players that are not going to specialize into one little thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really feels to me that with all of these different game systems that are being introduced, it it allows you to tailor exactly that level of specialization that you're looking for. I think it really evens the playing field in a lot of ways as well. And um, obviously, if you're spending more, you're still going to be able to do more to the extent that you are progressing through the game. But that example that you used, the fuel for example, it might not make a lot of sense for somebody that's operating commander fighter
Mhm.
class ships to go specialize in fuel, because the opportunities that are present for that player, if they respect their account in a particular way, obviously thinking about fighting combat, territory control, gameplay loops, it might not make any sense for them to even extract hydrogen and craft fuel, or again, whatever the fuel source or type might be in the future. And so that opens the door then for some other player that is maybe trying to go from zero to hero, or progress along and get access to bigger assets over time. This opens up that opportunity. So that opportunity, by the way, is is also super critical to long-term sustainability in the economy, right? Because it's not it drives exchange between users, and
Well,
that
when it,
trade between users is what creates the real peer-to-peer play to earn of Star Atlas.
and we're already seeing that, which is beautiful. Like I'll buy fuel at MRZ20. We have a new player that just joined Rome not that long ago, and that's all he does. He just crafts fuel at MRZ20, and players like me buy it, and it's awesome, right? So, and with specialization, it will increase smaller players' APRs, and I know that's something you brought up before, where the ideal economic design is that smaller players actually get bigger APRs, bigger ROIs than the bigger players. And it's just kind of the ultimate design with specialization. And especially with some of the perks coming in the Atlas locker, I think we'll see that come to life.
Yes, and I mean that is a goal. One thing we can't really do is force that, but there's a bit of like tinkering that can be done to try to drive that dynamic to exist. Um, it's especially when systems get as complex as this, and there's as many economic variables as they are. It's far and away from the way that Faction Fleet was designed, for example, where we have um, architectural constraints over, say, earnings potential. And so from that perspective, and claim stakes, actually, we had the same thing in the way that claim stakes operate now on faction claims, where we could literally sit there and look at the numbers and say this one should perhaps outperform slightly because it's outperforming on a percentage basis but not on a nominal basis, right? Like the more valuable asset is still far and away outproducing what the smaller assets are, but just on a percentage basis it's slightly lower. Well, we don't have that level of control when it's an open economy, and things change dynamically from moment to moment. But we could certainly try to drive it in that direction to some extent. That's also um, it's one of the biggest constraints I would add on the way that the economy works right now, where it's essentially everybody by and large can do just about everything, or if there's a very obvious um, uh, like higher yielding opportunity in any one area, everybody will go after it. And uh, given we're looking at finite resources, I'm really thinking in the back of my mind right now. I'm thinking about uh, things like the ship recipes for ship redemptions, you know, um, and smaller players would like to target that because it gives them a progression track where they get something like the Max Hog, for example, at the end of it, and that feels good. That feels like an accomplishment. Um, and we had to come back in and reformulate the recipes there, because if that's the high yielding activity, then the largest players will just target it as well, and they'll craft everything they can. They will exhaust that supply, and then that opportunity goes away for the smaller player anyway. So um, we just don't have the restrictions in place where we can say like, hey, your account can craft 5 of these. We just can't do that on chain at the moment, where there's like a cap, and then that leaves that opportunity available for other players. Even if we could do that, it would just give rise to multi-accounting, right? And so that's how these things like council rank, by the way, will start to come into play, uh, because perhaps part of being able to craft that item is you have to have progressed to a certain point. And so if you do exhaust your restricted amount that you're able to craft, and you want to just spin up a new account, well, the opportunity isn't immediately available. You're still going to have to go through the progression, and if we design it right, it's not worth it for you to do that. It's worth it for you to it's more valuable for you to go pursue some other activity.
By the way, here's the moment where I think it becomes impossible to do everything. It's when Unreal Engine 5 mechanics, you would need an army of dozens of people playing every single mechanic, and maybe there'll be some people that'll try to do that and hire and build an army, which will be great. That's the labor economy you've talked about in some
Hmm.
podcasts a long time ago. But that's when it's going to be hard for even the biggest players to do everything. Because in Sage, with automation and things like that, or if you just can buy your way into it, it's hard. But with Unreal Engine 5, you have time. And someone like me, I don't have time. I don't have time to, you know, play Unreal Engine 5 that much. I play Sage and that's it. And, you know, unless I hire an army of players to do every single thing in UE5, um, I won't be able to keep up. So that's where I think you'll really create a separation there.
Yeah, but I would love to see those labor markets form, by the way, and it's kind
Yeah.
of the basis of DAX. There very well could be DAX formed that go raise some money and say, hey, we're going to hire a bunch of people to go play the game, and they're going to execute on our strategy. I mean, I think that's an incredible thing. Maybe a little bit disconnected from what a lot of game studios or publishers would target, but I think that's, it's certainly part of my philosophy with the Web3 side and real economic incentives is, these labor markets can arrive. You could get a job being a,
Mm-hmm.
mining ship captain in Star Atlas without even owning anything and get paid some hourly wage. I think that's pretty cool, and it creates a lot of opportunity globally.
Yeah, no, I've had my nephew grinding all kinds of games, and a lot of them are either dead or in a coma. And with the UE5 mechanics coming really soon, like that's all he's going to do. Like that this is it. This is Final Destination, Star Atlas UE5. You're going to live in that world. So I'm super excited, and he's excited, and that announcement you guys made to the roadmap a couple of days ago. He's psyched, and I'm psyched. So it's
Nice.
coming. Last thing we didn't cover that much is claim stakes, which uh, just an FYI for you, I would say that's the most anticipated of the C's, at least
Hmm.
behind the scenes. Players cannot wait to set up claim stakes. Of course, mining has been an incredibly hot gaming loop, but with claim stakes, it's going to add, of course, a lot more complexity and mechanics and excitement. So, yeah, what can you reveal about claim stakes? What should we expect?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I can reveal more than what you just outlined there, but I will say it adds certainly a layer of depth and complexity to the resource economy that is probably orders of magnitude over what we have right now. Not only, this is coupled with the introduction of so many diverse new resources and new areas and new geographical layout of the map, but um, from what I've seen in the prototyping, there's these claim stakes are so configurable. I mean, it's an entire game in and of itself.
Wow.
Again, I'm actually a little bit. I see all of these things, and virtual you're a whale. I'm pretty sizable asset holder myself. We're both busy guys. I'm sitting here thinking, like, man, how am I going to manage all of this stuff, right? Because it which is a really positive thing, and this is what we
Yeah.
want, and it speaks directly to that specialization that we were just talking about. So um, I think it's a good thing. But man, claim stakes from uh, you know plot layouts, plot size, building types, drill bits, resource selection, storage facilities, using your what are they called, the like the transport sleds. Now, we won't have space stations with the initial launch, but I assume that's going to be some iterative nearer term release after C4 comes out, where we add the space stations, and then um, not even worth really getting into that. But that's, you have your fully configurable space station, and the way you couple that with ground operations and mining as well. But um, all of those are variables that determine how performant your claim stake is, and obviously just location that you select around the map as well. So it's definitely a metagame. I don't know if I don't know if Danny would describe it, going so far as to say, like, satisfactory or factorio, but um, it's the prototyping is quite complex already.
I'm assuming that, like, with each star base, there's actually multiple planets. And right now, we don't really have access to those. Are those coming in the next iteration of the map where, basically you can put a claim stake in any one of these, planets, whether it's the ice or the gas or the, you know, is that going to be fleshed out on the V1 release, or that's coming later?
I think the goal is to have to enable claim stake placement at any planetary celestial body that is on the map.
Got it. And that alone is going to multiply the possibilities and complexity. I mean, right now it's basically one location, and now for every location is going to be multiplied by 5, 6, 7, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it moves to true coordinate-based system, right?
Mm.
Like you're saying, the sector-based, when you go to a star base, you can see the list of planets that are there, but you're not moving to that planet to mine something. For all intent and effect, you're just mining straight from that star base, right? Which it isn't actually what's happening if you want to imagine it. It's your fleet's going to one of those planets and mining the resource from it. But um, in this kind of new geospatial map coordinate based, you can go direct to a single planet. You can go direct to an asteroid field. Um, uh, to initiate your mining activity, or to place your claim stakes, uh, or to engage in combat.
Love it. All right, let's get to some Q&A. That was awesome. I think a lot of juicy alpha there for all the existing players, and hopefully an exciting introduction to people that are curious about Star Atlas. So I'm going to start with the spiciest question, which is, and the rest aren't that spicy. So I got one spicy question, and this comes up all the time. The question is, how's your runway? And I did prepare a slide, kind of showcasing some of your sources of revenue, but it's always a concern. We've seen a lot of projects die recently. We'll probably see more die soon. And even a lot of the, say, diehards in Star Atlas, they will say the only way we're not becoming the greatest, biggest game of all time is if we run out of money, right? So again, I'm not, whatever you're comfortable sharing. It is a question that came up, so I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, I mean, um, we had a really positive, call it first 6 months, maybe first 8 months of 2024. That was that secular cycle. There was kind of mini pumps going off. Atlas and Polis hit, was at 1.2 cents on Atlas. Polis, I can't remember. It got to 60 cents, I want to say, something like that. We had the Titan sales come in. We had released mining class ships, the M platform in particular. We had some freighter models release, and then the data runner models. We saw good sales of those coupled with those specific mechanics in Sage. And so we were able to stock away a good amount of capital onto the balance sheet. We've been very slow, very strategic, much to the chagrin of many people on the team in hiring. Right, I've been extremely conservative in our hiring process over the last year. Now we have added people, we have grown, and I think it's maybe 10 to 12 key roles. I might be underestimating that a little bit, but point is, we haven't bloated our budget, and we weren't relying on the market that we saw in early 2024 to persist forever. So it was really about savings and setting up a cushion for ourselves, specifically for times like this. Now that our cash flow positivity carried through actually until March. So this last month, we had a net negative revenue month. And I don't know if this is necessarily market sentiment, or most of our revenue comes from existing players. It's not because we've seen a lot of player growth, but our revenues have slowed down quite considerably. And then obviously we're taking an impact with our cash flows from token sales, Atlas and Polis, given where markets are right now. So I'm not worried. I'll put it that way. I think we have good runway ahead of us. We have a solid year ahead of us. We're going to hit all of our goals this year. I do think we have big potential for new user acquisition. I think that's true whether or not we enter into a real bull market or not, but certainly I'm hopeful for it. I think everybody that's in crypto is hopeful for it. I think that could have massive impacts, positive impacts for us. We're also looking at, and I touched on these loosely, but other revenue streams, and specifically off of that free-to-play product. The subscription model and the microtransaction model. Now, I think the growth potential on a free-to-play product is quite high, and this might be optimistic, but I don't think it's unrealistic to get 100,000 daily active users, especially considering we're working on a mobile format of that. And should we achieve that, some portion of those become paid users, and so that's an additional revenue stream for us. So I'm very optimistic about this year, but I would be lying if I said I was fine with revenues being where they are right now, and I'm okay with markets being where they are right now. Obviously, if things stay like this, then we would have to get into discussions again about restructuring. If I can offer some assurance out there, I think one thing that we've demonstrated is we've been able to overcome extremely challenging financial times and ones that are were less predictable, right? I mean, the money that was lost in the FTX event, that happened overnight. And so I'm looking at numbers, and we as a team are reviewing budget and finances. I'm looking at these daily, but the wider team is looking at them weekly. So should we need to make changes, we'd be well positioned to do so at the time that we need to do so. I don't think we'll let ourselves get into a dire situation. So I hate to even talk about it. It's not the path we would want to take, but if it meant reductions for team reductions for sustainability, it's something that obviously it's the only logical path forward so that we can keep going, and we're not going to burn everything, all of our capital up and close doors. We're going to do what we need to do to make sure that this thing can be continued to be built, even if that means a smaller team. So we're very much thinking about the path forward on that, what actions we would need to take. But beyond all of that, I'm optimistic for the year, both in terms of products that we have lined up, the ability to attract new users, the ability to create new revenue streams, the ability to create demand for existing assets that are on the marketplace, as well as new item releases coupled with those product releases, as well as being pretty optimistic that we still are going to get a bull market at some point this year, which we certainly would want to capitalize on. There's also one, I'll leave you with this on this part. There's something that we have not announced, I will not be announcing, but it is transformative. It's significant in the way that we operate, and we're lining up for an announcement of that mid-year, probably sometime in July or shortly thereafter. But all of these things kind of drive that same objective of growth in users, growth in exposure, wider distribution, reaching all of those user profiles that I was describing before in different ways, and of course, driving revenues and asset values as a result of that.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment around growing teams and dealing with that over time. I've been an entrepreneur. It's going to be like my 29th year. And with my current organization, we've had, I think, 2 or 3 times where, we had to contract a little bit because things were tight. So I think, business in general is always this process of expansion and contraction, and you're it's part of the game, right? And you learned that obviously in the last cycle, hashtag battle tested and learned from that. So, the fact you guys have been through a cycle successfully, it's huge. The longer you guys stay in the game, I think gives you so much credibility as a company, as a team. And, I think it's just a matter of time. Like, Star Atlas is going to be too awesome to deny, too awesome to ignore. And every release you guys build, every feature, every new game mode is just amplifying that, adding to that. And the momentum is real. The velocity you guys are operating at is mind blowing. I don't think you guys have ever been operating at this clip, even when you guys were a lot bigger. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I totally agree. And we are, we are still about half the size of our all-time largest team size, and yeah, probably producing at a velocity that's at least 5x the speed. And it's just tighter cohesion across the team and identification of goals, objectives, and timing of things. There's a lot of unpredictability and timing early on, and probably being overly ambitious in what we thought we could accomplish in a given time frame. Uh, how does there's a quote that I'm going to butcher, but it's along the lines of uh, you significantly overestimate the amount
Mhm.
that you can accomplish in a year, but you
Mhm.
also significantly underestimate the amount that you can accomplish over 5 years.
Mhm.
you know and so we're almost at 5 years. I think we're getting really good at dialing in uh, target dates and timelines, and having internal accountability around that, even though we're not publishing that information, because it creates a lot of added strain and stress that isn't entirely necessary.
Great answer. So, I'm gonna get a few more questions from Gaz. He's asking how long before or after C4 before you activate the Atlas Addendum locker.
It's a good question. So we don't have we actually don't have our planning for the team. Really more on like the blockchain and web dev side, following uh, C4. I say that loosely. It's somewhat related to our other project, but um, that I alluded to. But I do want to put some energy into that, and I think it's probably the next thing after C4 is to work on at least one or two of those Atlas Addendum items. What I'd really like to see is probably the crafting fee discounts based on Atlas Locker. I think that'd be,
Mhm.
excuse me, the
That'd be huge.
I think that would be the most impactful. I also want to see fleet rental fee discounts uh, probably in there.
Hmm.
The
Nice.
other ones, yeah, the other ones I'm not too clear on where the priority would fall just yet, but I think the crafting fees would be a pretty big one.
As somebody who spends a lot on crafting fees, I would concur.
Right.
All right. Question from Nord. have has there been any conversations about future land plot spaces within the Titan ships? Which I didn't even know that was a thing, honestly. Like, I just bought the Titan, but is what's your future vision, I guess, around land plot spaces within the Titans?
Yeah, well, shout out Nord for anyone that doesn't know. He's running the Super Phoenix DAO, and he has big metaversal entertainment ambitions on how to employ that asset for experiences that are not just strictly gameplay,
Mhm.
concerts, performances, and really leveraging it as an entertainment venue. Uh, uh, well, I don't know what timing would look like in terms of when we can further segment out the Titan assets. But for your sake, virtual, yes, those Titans all do come with land plots on them as well. And so, for anyone out there that is looking at buying a Titan, think about it, because it's probably millions of dollars worth of land plots if you were to value them at the same price that we value the Central Space Station land plots. And then you as an operator, the ultimate goal here would be to essentially leverage those as access points onto your game asset. So you can either provide a permission for somebody to uh, enter into one of the halves on a land plot, or you could sell them to other people. You
Mhm.
could rent them out on a periodic basis, and to the extent that someone has access to that, that is effectively their key to accessing at least some areas of your Titan. But we're getting, that's pretty nuanced when you have the nested assets within the Titan asset that is going to need to be navigating around the universe, probably not parked at one location. How do you enter and exit and gain access to that? So I'm not, was that the question he was asking, is when are we, when do we anticipate seeing land plot
Yeah, kind
activation?
of. Yeah, just has there been any more conversations around it?
There really haven't. I think it's going to take a considerable amount of work just to
Mhm.
get the Titan assets uh, to a phase one gold standard from an aesthetic,
Mhm.
internal layout standpoint. And I'm not sure when that other level of detail is going to get introduced.
Do you know what I'm bullish on from that mechanics? It would be the gym. If fitness is a great perk, if you look at the fitness aptitude for crew,
Hmm.
the perks are awesome. And I know that at least my Titan has a pretty cool gym. You can play basketball and surf and do squats. So if somebody can, you know, have a hab inside the Titan and then go train their crew within the gym, that would be a pretty juicy perk, right?
For
So
sure.
cool utility there.
And I think something like that would be easier to implement than a functional hab that other players can interact with,
Right.
right? So that, or a university, same thing with crew. Put your
Mhm.
crew in the university and they can progress along some curriculum track, something like that.
All right, next from Winston and from Mika, fellow Romans. Question is, what's the status on metagravity? Seems to have shifted away. Was it cost? Were you happy, unhappy? Are you still considering it?
Oh, we're still considering it. We're still partnered with them. We have sidelined our efforts with them, and that was to specifically focus on um, our own multiplayer services through Epic, so EOS, Epic Online Services, uh, and part of the rationale for that was really we were emphasizing and focusing on our arena shooter modes. Yes, we did the surge gameplay, and I think that was pretty cool. I think pretty impressive seeing what 1100 or something like that concurrent users in the showroom at Volant Station. But really, these arena shooter modes are designed for uh, smaller concurrent player groups, and we were able to execute on that a bit better with EOS. And we were still navigating how to work out the anti cheat. We actually got a nice basic anti cheat solution by using EOS. That's easy anti cheat. You probably have seen this if you've logged into games before. By no means is this the end all anti cheat solution that we'll be using, but it gives us at least a baseline anti-cheat integration. And so we shifted to those efforts, but we do need a hyperscale user concurrency multiplayer solution. So the plan is later this year, pick things back up and see what we can accomplish with metagravity.
Cool. Another question from Mika. What's up with the mobile app for crew? I know you've covered this, and yeah, maybe for those of you that don't know, just remind them what's going on.
Yeah, the mobile app, the intention there was mobile move to earn. It's a fitness app, walk, run, bicycle ride, possibly get stationary workouts in there. But as you're engaged in physical world fitness and activity, the slotted crew member that you had in the mobile app would level up with you. Ran into some complications with the uh, movement tracking algorithm when we got to the 1 yard line with it, and so it is just indefinitely sidelined right at the moment. Building that algorithm ourselves would be uh, a massive distraction from
Mhm.
our other objectives as a company. It's not something that I would refocus a large portion of company resources on at this point. What is still possible, and where we had some uh, a possible path forward, was actually with a partnership, and it didn't really materialize. But there are several companies out there, probably many, that um, not even just in Web 3, but across Web 2, that have built entire business models around this. So I do think that there's a viable path at some point, if we can make the economics work out, to create a crossover platform of some sort, if not our own custom version, leveraging some of their tech. Uh, but we really are on a hard blocker now with being able to verify movement data.
Got it. Yeah. My prediction is the right provider will pop up, sooner than later, and you guys will be able to release that. And I still think what would make the mobile app a gangbuster is if you can not just level up your crew, but also have a Pokemon Go type dynamic where you can maybe gather again exotic resources only available through the crew app and then sell those to stage players, etc. I mean, I think the combo would really add some napalm to the crew app. Anyways,
I
so
ag- I
yeah, go ahead.
agree with you, by the way. I think the AR experiences coupled with the app would be 10 times more attractive than just a pure, fitness tracker
Hmm.
and progression. So yeah, right time, right place. Still something I'm very interested in. I think it's a mobile platform, potential for wide distribution, uh, easy to use. My mom wants to use it, so if that says anything, I think the audience could be quite wide on it. But yeah, and we do have conversations that we've opened up previously. Again, they didn't really materialize, but that's not to say there's no path forward at some point in the future.
Cool. Another question from Mika. What's the plan regarding the current game map? Should we expect to bring everything back to the CSS?
This is Mika's AMA apparently. Was that 3 or 4 in a row now?
Yeah, this is last one.
Uh, I will reveal that. So there will be a map change when we get to C4.
The
Should
fear,
I
the
say?
fear is, the fear is, do we need to haul back everything to CSS?
Let's see. It's such a catch 22 for me to share this, but so what I'll say is most likely you will not need to transport your items back to the CSS with the program change on this next one. The
And
risk is that everybody plans around that, and and they get an instant teleportation of resources back to the CSS.
got it. I thought you were going to offer free transport for all the players to haul their stuff back to CSS, but teleportation is even better. Um,
I'm going to impose a tariff for all resources that are not on the CSS. That'll just be deducted from players' accounts if they don't move them.
there you go.
That's a joke. Don't worry, guys.
Now, again, Mika crammed a couple more here, but how much travel time should we expect with the new map going from Starbase to Starbase? I mean, it sounds like the new map's going to be a lot bigger. And are you going to change subwarp speed, or is it just going to take a lot longer? Are the ships going to burn less fuel? I guess there's concerns because even right now, going from one side of the map to another, with a lot of the ships, it burns most of the tank, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, curious. around travel time, and it's going to be adjustments to fuel burn. Any visions around that? Clarity.
I I don't know what the factor increase will be, but yes, I would expect it to take more time. There's finer granularity across the map and the things that you can engage in. But to be honest with you, I don't think Chris has even gotten into any of the numbers on that just yet, as we're waiting for this to get through the blockchain development phase. So I think the team and Chris in particular can move pretty quickly when the timing is right. But I don't have any specifics on what those exact numbers are going to look like right now.
Cool. All right, we got two more serious questions, and we got some fun ones from Duyo, another Roman. How detailed will scanning mechanics be? We saw a scan before the mining process. How will that translate to scanning ships? And is thermal scanning a completely separate thing? Assuming there's heat sinks. So just any alpha around the future of scanning.
Just that scanning is going to be completely different. It's a very basic mechanic right now that allowed us to create utility for that ship role, and it also benefited quite substantially in being able to introduce those survey data units as recipes, and with a greater level of control on the emissions of those than we have on the other resources. But yes, it's going to be an entire profession. It's an entire career. So it'll get a lot more complicated and sophisticated than it is now, and what you're able to do with it and how it's used.
Last serious question from Zamsor, Roman brother. He says, Star Atlas is a cyber nation. In many early interviews, you talked about creating a borderless worldwide labor market. Right now, we're obviously not there yet. Larger players participating in Sage do not need to hire human labor due to the automation tools currently available. The one idea that I've heard that could be the first candidate as the catalyst towards creating the need to hire humans and unleashing the labor market is having resources that can only be mined, harvested, and obtained in UE5 gameplay, especially if we made these resources highly valuable. Question is, how are you thinking about this? And are there other ideas that could be the catalyst for the global labor markets? I mean, we kind of hit on some of this stuff earlier, but anything else you want to add?
I think we hit on a lot of it, and I think it really does come down to the level of specialization, and it's really like the level of predictability within the game as well. I think things do change a lot when there's combat, and there's going to be multiple iterative phases of that rolling out over time, and the implications of that. But uh, I said I do want automation to persist in the game. I think it's a very reasonable feature to have included, and I love that we have the automation services that were developed externally. But at some point, these should really be default mechanics. But um, I think where probably the bigger opportunity comes from is, like I said, first of all, specialization. But second of all, to what extent does the direct player interaction lead to better outcomes? And it doesn't, I'm not even talking about as extreme as what we've seen in the UE mining demo, where
Mhm.
it's a mini game where like, you have to control, it has to be player controlled. That could even probably be automated, to be honest with you. But uh, the player performance in that particular mechanic, where you're trying to keep the laser aligned with the breakpoint, stuff like that. If player direct player engagement leads to better outcomes, that leads to opportunities. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think if you guys add some good RNG, kind of like you did with Crew, with some of the loot in UE5, and a player who just buys one crew, goes in UE5 and pulls $30 worth of rare loot, you're gonna see a level of addiction. If even if it's like there's a 1% chance or a 0. 1% chance you find a $50 loot box in UE5, you're going to see a lot of people grinding for that. And of course, we all know the future of finance is XP. So
Hey, XP is going to have a
your cat
lot of
agrees with
value.
me.
Yeah, she's probably looking for dinner.
Yeah. So let's wrap up the interview. But I did miss one question from Gaz. Is there going to be combat loot systems with C4? If you blow up another opponent, can you loot some of their cargo?
Yes, and I can do you one better because free to play will actually roll out with combat systems and loot,
Nice.
which I think is going to be really beneficial, by the way, because I have my concerns about combat. I know community has concerns about combat. We essentially have a um, uh, you know, relatively inconsequential environment that we can deploy combat in, get people trying it out. We can take lessons from that as we continue towards the development of and deployment of C4. And by the way, there is also a test net deployment of C4 that will go out as a PTR, player test range, before it goes to mainnet and we have it live and functional. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity to explore and experiment with combat systems before this gets to mainnet.
Awesome. All right, ready for some fun ones?
Sure.
All right, Earther, when rich?
I'm gonna say November 26, 2025.
Love that. From Earther, when girlfriend for you? Um,
Man, tell me about it. Hard to say. I've got my hands full right now with uh, a lot of responsibilities. So
yeah, keep the men focused. Women have a way of unfocusing a man. All right, from Signal, what does your perfect Sunday look like?
was this? Oh wait, no, today's Monday, right? Well, yesterday was pretty nice. I've gotten back into climbing, so I got a good gym session in climbing, some weights, hit the sauna, cooked myself a little dinner, and just relaxed, man. I mean, I like working out on Sundays,
Nice.
so yeah.
And what was for dinner? What's your go to? What's your best meal that you prep for yourself?
Well, should I lie to you and tell you what I was going to make, or should I tell you what I actually made after I decided to be lazy?
Both.
I was going to do pan-seared salmon with a pasta in a lemon beurre blanc sauce.
Whoa.
Did not make that. I ended up making a double bacon cheeseburger with avocado on the side.
I mean, yeah, I don't know which one's better. I mean, I think the hamburger is one of the greatest creations of all time. So, yeah. All right. Next from Nate, aka Forged in Crypto. When race Cyber Beast versus Cyber Beast?
Does he have one?
Yep.
All right. Well, I mean, I guess they can't get any more even than that, right? What has he made his like more aerodynamic? I don't know.
I know his. Well, his has a deep wrap. You know, his company deep. It does
Oh
have
yeah,
wrap.
yeah.
Maybe that'll slow him down. I don't know.
I think so. It might.
There
I'm
you go.
game. Pink
All right.
slips. Tell
All
him
right.
to put the Titan on the line.
All right. From IC, top 10 books, but maybe that's too much. You know, what's been the most impactful books you've read?
I actually saw that post right before we came on, and I was like, "Oh man, I hope he doesn't ask that." um, I'm trying to because I was trying to think through some of the things that I read, uh, and it's going to sound boring because it's just some of the stuff that I actually remember, and probably wasn't the most impactful. But I will say, Atlas Shrugged. I actually
Hmm.
is a book that resonated with me when I read it. I'd like to
Yeah.
read it again, uh, but the thing is like 1,500 pages of tiny text, so you've got to be prepared for it. but Atlas Shrugged was a great book.
Mhm.
Snow Crash was one that I really just, fiction, but just like, I guess Atlas Shrugged was as well, but it feels like reality now. But
Mhm.
Snow Crash was a really great novel. I can't really remember anything else. Nothing sticks out to me that I've read.
Got it. Yeah, I was really, really into Ayn Rand in my early 20s. Read most of her stuff, including Atlas Shrugged, which is definitely a commitment. All right, Saint Just is asking when you're releasing the Pierce MR8. I mean, just tell him, hey, when you commit to 10, I'll release it. That's my answer. But what's your answer?
Yeah, I mean, we're just holding back all asset sales for the time being, kind of seeing where demand uh,
Mhm.
resolves, and more than likely when we have some major feature releases, we'll get some new asset classes into the mix. In particular, though, would really like to have uh, the role utility online at the time that we release anything new.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the most successful sales, obviously the miners, the fighters, the scanners, because they all have utility, right? And so, from a sales perspective, smart to wait till the mechanics are in the game before releasing those ships.
Mhm.
All right, last question from Siggy. He's asking how many people are currently working on UE5, including third-party companies.
Uh, I don't know exactly. Probably, I'm gonna say between 50 and 65, if I had to guess. Yeah, I can't say specifically, but it's about half the team, something like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, I think I didn't check the time on the first interview. I think we went a little longer. And what's exciting is we had more stuff to show, right? Show don't tell. We showed some of the clips in the beginning with some of the new gameplay mechanics. We showed how the economy is doing. I mean, there is no second best. There is none. We've seen a lot of game studios go down, and a lot of current games are in a coma. So, you guys have just, in my opinion, outdone yourselves, and the best is yet to come. Just going from strength to strength. So, thanks for your time. Thank you for creating the dream vision, the dream game. I've been a gamer since I'm 4 years old, and I literally fantasized growing up about playing something like Star Atlas, where the time you put into it, the assets you build in the game actually meant something. And here we are, and you guys have gone above and beyond. It's there's some really I was actually doing some grok searches the other day about video gaming, and there's a bunch of benefits, like 50% faster processing speed. There's some interesting data with surgeons, the camaraderie, the friendships. Like there's a lot of benefits. Like it's not just escapism and quote unquote wasting your time. Like there's a lot of value to playing games. And my vision long term is that my daughter and hopefully my future son continue the Star Atlas empire after maybe I'm not as active in a couple of decades. So anyways, thank you. Thanks to all the team. You guys are unparalleled.
I like to think anybody that is playing Sage has had their IQ lifted by at least 20 points over the last year and a half. But no, definitely some cognitive benefits to video gaming. No question about that. It's been a grind for sure, but we do have an absolutely incredible team behind us here at Automata working on Star Atlas, and uh, I don't say this superficially. Like we're here today because of this community that we've had that's behind this idea, this vision. So we have a best in class team, we have a best in
Mhm.
class community, and we have the determination and perseverance to get this thing over the line. So thanks, man.
And I will say, true story, I've created the most complicated spreadsheets of my life to play Sage. Like Sage has taken my spreadsheet capabilities like to just a completely different dimension. Like I've never built spreadsheets like that for any of my companies, and I've got 160 employees. So there you go. True life, real life benefits.
What is it? The highest and best use of time? I don't know, man. But that's the power of a real live economy, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you should try to plug those in. A bunch of the team are using various uh, um, code building AI services like Windsurf and
Yeah.
Cursor.
Mm-hmm.
Danny's, well, Jacob's using it heavily, but like Danny's building full prototype applications with just via prompts. So I'd be curious to see what you could create to replace your spreadsheets.
Already on it. My lead dev was giving me a demo of Windsurfer, so I downloaded it. We were playing with it. I was actually trying to create since Dom loves marble games so much, I was actually trying to create a Star Atlas marble game with Windsurfer.
I love that.
I failed so far, but I'm not giving up yet.
That's awesome. I hope to see that come to life.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody for listening. Again, I'll put some links in the show notes to the roadmap, to all kinds of stuff. So check the show notes. And thank you again, Michael. We'll have to have you for part 3, maybe end of year, maybe early next year, with all the exciting stuff. There'll be tons of stuff to talk about. There always is. Peace out.
My pleasure. Talk soon.